Okay, so what is...
You are looking live at the Soyuz MS-18 spacecraft attached to the Earth-facing port of the new Nauka Multipurpose Laboratory Module at the International Space Station. This is the vehicle that will undock from the complex about 5 hours from now, ringing down the curtain on 12 days of movie-making on the station by a pair of spaceflight participants. And this is the vehicle that will carry a veteran Russian cosmonaut home after 6.5 months aboard the orbital outpost. That trio is headed for a parachute-assisted landing on the desolate steppe of Kazakhstan at 11:36 p.m. Central Time tonight, 10:36 a.m. Kazakhstan time Sunday morning at a site about 92 miles southeast of the town of Zhezkazgan. The weather forecast for landing for the returning crew calls for clear skies on that Sunday morning, temperatures in the low 40s. We'll discuss their undocking and entry timeline in detail in a moment. Good afternoon from Mission Control Houston and the International Space Station Flight Control Room. It is homecoming day for Russian cosmonaut Oleg Novitskiy of Roscosmos, the Soyuz commander, Russian actress Yulia Peresild, and her producer-director Klim Shipenko. Peresild and Shipenko spent almost 2 weeks on the station filming scenes for a movie titled Challenge, in which she portrays a surgeon launched to the station to attend to an ailing crew member who was portrayed by Novitskiy. The movie-making venture was arranged between Roscosmos and Moscow-based media entities. Just a few minutes from now, Peresild and Shipenko will bid farewell to the Expedition 65 crew members with whom they spent the last 12 days on the station, and they will climb aboard their Soyuz MS-18 spacecraft to be assisted by Novitskiy in suiting up in their Russian Sokol launch and entry suits for the ride back to Earth. Novitskiy will join them aboard the Soyuz a short time later and will close the hatch to the vehicle around 4:45 p.m. Central Time. We will not be on the air for the hatch closure itself. We will replay that activity, however, this evening as part of our Soyuz undocking coverage. About an hour and a half ago, the Soyuz was activated by Novitskiy. Its systems are up and running, ready to come off of internal, coming off of space station power sources and going to internal power for the remainder of its undocking and powered flight away from the station, and then ultimately the deorbit burn later this evening that will begin the trip back into the Earth's atmosphere, with the Soyuz headed for its landing in central Kazakhstan. Peresild and Shipenko launched on a different vehicle, the Soyuz MS-19, back on October 5th from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan with another veteran cosmonaut, Anton Shkaplerov. They launched on a fast-track 2-orbit 3-hour trajectory, docking to the Rosviet module on the Earth-facing side of the Russian segment of the station. Shkaplerov will remain aboard the space station for the next 5 months, returning in the MS-19 craft with NASA astronaut Mark Vande Hei and Russian cosmonaut Pyotr Dubrov in late March. Novitskiy returns to Earth tonight, having logged 191 days in space on a mission spanning 3,056 orbits of the Earth and 80.9 million miles. When he lands, Novitskiy will have chalked up 531 days in space on his 3 missions. For the spaceflight participants, Peresild and Shipenko traveled 5.1 million miles, spanning 192 orbits of the Earth during their 12 days away from the planet. This, by the way, is the first time a Soyuz will have returned to Earth without a U.S. crew member on board since September 12, 2015, when Russian cosmonaut Gennady Padalka, European Space Agency astronaut Andy Mogensen, and Kazakh cosmonaut Aydin Aimbetov landed in their Soyuz TMA-16M spacecraft. Today's undocking and landing comes in the wake of an activity yesterday in which Russian flight controllers conducted a scheduled thruster firing test on this Soyuz MS-18 spacecraft. However, the thruster firing unexpectedly continued after the end of the test window, resulting in a temporary loss of orientation control for the International Space Station. Within 30 minutes, flight controllers regained control of the space station, obviously now in a stable configuration. The crew was never in any danger. Flight controllers continuing to evaluate data on that brief attitude excursion due to the thruster firing. NASA and Roscosmos collaborating to understand the root cause. But the Soyuz is in good shape, was declared ready to support undocking and landing this evening, and everything is in order for the departure of Novitskiy, Peresild, and Shipenko. At the time of undocking this evening, which is scheduled for 8:14 p.m. Central Time, 9:14 p.m. Eastern Time, that will mark the official end of Expedition 65 and the beginning of Expedition 66 under the command of European Space Agency astronaut Thomas Pesquet. Expedition 66 in this crew portrait actually shows what will be the crew configuration after the departure of the Crew 2 crew, Pesquet, Shane Kimbrough, Megan MacArthur, and Aki Hoshide. From left to right in this Expedition 66 crew portrait shows the oncoming Crew 3 crew members who are scheduled to launch October 30th from the Kennedy Space Center. Rasha Chari, Tom Marshburn, Matthias Maurer of the European Space Agency, Anton Shkaplerov, who will take over command of the station from Pesquet just a few hours before the Crew 2 crew departs. Also Pyotr Dubrov, Caleb Barron of NASA, and Mark Vande Hei on the far right. Vande Hei and Dubrov headed for 355 days in space before they return home in late March with Shkaplerov. At this hour, the International Space Station is flying 258 miles above the Earth, moving from southwest to northeast in an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator over the Pacific Ocean, coming into an orbital sunrise over the vehicle. A good view there of the Soyuz MS-18 spacecraft, which is the ride home for Novitskiy, Peresild, and Shipenko today. This vehicle relocated a couple of weeks ago from one docking port to Nauka to open up the Nauka, the Rassvet module for the arrival of the Soyuz MS-19 that brought Shkaplerov, Peresild, and Shipenko up to the International Space Station. Nauka, of course, the newest and one of the largest modules on the International Space Station, arrived in late July following its launch from Baikonur on a Proton M rocket. Just a few minutes from now, we'll be expecting to come inside the International Space Station at the vestibule connecting Nauka to the Soyuz MS-18 spacecraft for farewells between the crew members. And again, as we mentioned earlier, Peresild and Shipenko will be first to board the Soyuz to begin the process of suiting up in their Silka launch and entry suits, assisted by Novitskiy, who will join them a bit later prior to the closing of the hatch to the Soyuz itself. The timeline for tonight's activities calls for the undocking command to be issued at 8:12 and 30 seconds p.m. Central Time to initiate the opening of the hooks holding the Soyuz spacecraft to the Nauka Multipurpose Laboratory module. It'll take about 90 seconds for those hooks to open, at which point springs on both sides of the docking interface will push off against one another and physical separation will occur. The undocking itself at 8:14 Central Time, 9:14 p.m. Eastern Time. There will be 2 separation burns executed by the Soyuz onboard computers to begin an opening rate away from the International Space Station to a safe distance away from the complex for the later deorbit burn this evening that will occur at 10:41 p.m. Central Time, 11:41 p.m. Eastern Time. That will be a 4-minute, 39-second retrograde firing of the Soyuz engine to slow the vehicle down by 128 meters per second, allowing it to drop out of orbit to begin its descent back into the Earth's atmosphere. About 29 minutes after the deorbit burn, the pyrotechnic separation of the 3 sections of the Soyuz will occur as the top portion that is docked to the Nauka docking port, that is the orbital module, and the rear section to which you see the solar arrays, that's the instrumentation and propulsion module, they will separate from the center section, which is the descent module, in which the crew will be strapped in, with Novitskiy in the center seat as Soyuz commander. To his left will be Shipenko as board engineer number 1, and to his right, Yulia Peresild, the Russian actress, who is serving tonight as board engineer number 2. The descent module is the only section of the Soyuz that survives re-entry. Its heat shield repelling temperatures that will build up to about 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit during the fiery re-entry back into the Earth's atmosphere before the parachute deployment sequence begins closer to the landing site. The parachutes will be commanded to open at 11:21 and 28 seconds p.m. Central Time, 11:21 and 28 seconds p.m. Central Time, and from that point on, it takes about 15 minutes under the chutes for the Soyuz to descend for its landing under the chutes, with landing scheduled at around 11:36 p.m. Central Time. In Kazakhstan, the Rosaviatsa Russian Search and Recovery Forces are in the early morning hours of Sunday morning, where they are in Karaganda, the staging city for tonight's landing operations, as has been the case for almost all of the Soyuz landings we have brought you over the course of these years. And there are helicopters both in Karaganda and in Zhezkazgan that will be airborne at the time of the deorbit burn in sequential fashion to move toward the landing site to begin the recovery of the crew just minutes after the touchdown of the Soyuz. Again, the landing scheduled just before 11:36 p.m. Central Time tonight at a site 92 miles to the southeast of the town of Zhezkazgan. After the Soyuz touches down, the search and recovery forces will make their way to the spacecraft and begin the process of extracting the crew, with Novitskiy coming out of the descent module first from the center seat of the Soyuz, followed by Shipenko and Peresild. They will have a few minutes in those familiar chairs nearby the capsule to get their land legs back. Novitskiy after 191 days in space, Peresild and Shipenko after 12 days in space. They'll be brought to a nearby medical tent to get out of their Sokol launch and entry suits into more comfortable clothing, and then ultimately will be flown by Russian Mi-8 helicopters to Karaganda, Kazakhstan, where a Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center aircraft will be standing by to take them back to their training base in Star City, Russia, outside of Moscow. This MS-18 vehicle was the spacecraft that brought Novitskiy, Vande Hei, and Dubarov to the International Space Station back on April 9th, returning home tonight after 191 days and a relocation from one docking port to another. And again, the undocking itself, the command for undocking scheduled about 4 hours and 42 minutes from now, with physical separation expected about 4 hours and 44 minutes from now, with the undocking, the physical separation, planned for 8:14 p.m. Central Time, 9:14 p.m. Eastern Time. It is a busy time of vehicle movements at the International Space Station. Coming up next week, the unpiloted ISS Progress 78 cargo craft that is currently docked to the Poisk module on the space-facing side of the Russian segment of the International Space Station will undock itself at 6:42 p.m. Central Time on Wednesday evening. It will fly off to a distance of about 100 or so miles away from the station, and then will reapproach the station for a redocking on Thursday evening. That redocking to take place to this same port that the Soyuz is currently linked up to, the Nauka module. The undock and redock, or relocation, if you will, this whole procedure is designed to put the Progress 78 cargo craft at Nauka to perform propellant leak checks of the Nauka fuel system prior to the time that Nauka is used for orientation control of the International Space Station in the future. So this undock and redock activity for the ISS Progress 78 cargo craft begins next Wednesday. There won't be any coverage of the undocking. However, we will be on the air Thursday to provide coverage of the rendezvous and redocking of the Progress 78 to the Nauka Multipurpose Laboratory Module. As mentioned earlier, we're just a few minutes away from receiving downlink television inside the passageway that connects Nauka to the Soyuz MS-18. That will enable us to listen in and watch farewells that will take place between the departing crew members, Novitskiy, Peresild, and Shipenko, as they say goodbye to their Expedition 65 colleagues, with whom Peresild and Shipenko have spent the last 12 days with. Novitskiy, of course, wrapping up 6.5 months on board the International Space Station, and as we mentioned, after he lands later tonight or Sunday morning Kazakhstan time, he will have chalked up 531 days in space on his 3 space flights.
Mission control at space to ground 2.
And now we are inside that passageway to the International Space Station's Nauka module. Klim Shipenko on the right, Yulia Peresild in the red jumpsuit, Pyotr Dubrov on the left.
M-15 Moscow SS on space round 1, go ahead. Right now, Oleg is asking at what time should the hatches be closed or closed but not latched?
23:45 is a completion.
So they're giving him instructions. They're giving him instructions on space round 2 right now. Okay, at 45 minutes. Okay, I got it.
To hear me, right? To see me? Yes. We are ready. Okay, very good. So, at the scheduled time, we'll start talking. We can hear and see you very well. We can see you are dressed officially. Very good. We'll be closing the hatches, and then we'll come back at the scheduled time. Very good, copy.
Oleg Novitskiy on the right, of course, the Soyuz commander for tonight's undocking and Soyuz landing. Handshakes and hugs, final farewells before Peresild and Shipenko make their way into their return craft. Anton Shkaplerov in the foreground. He rode uphill with Peresild and Shipenko on October 5th. Novitskiy now inside, and as we mentioned, Novitskiy will help Peresild and Shipenko suit up in their Russian Sokol launch and entry suits. He will suit up after them. The actual closing of the hatch for the final time will take place at about 4:45 p.m. Central Time this afternoon. Klim Shipenko, the producer-director for this movie-making mission, aboard the International Space Station on behalf of Roscosmos and Moscow-based media entities, will be in the left seat of the descent module, the center section of the three-section Soyuz spacecraft. He will serve as board engineer number 1 for undocking through landing. Peresild will be in the right seat as board engineer number 2. And there we are, the Soyuz hatch closed. And the station hatch closed. 3:41 p.m. Central Time. The crew deciding to close the hatches a bit earlier so that they have ample time to get suited up. What,
Ребята, все, мы получили видеоизображение, можно выключать камеру.
You can turn off the camera.
And what we're being told is that this hatch closure is all part of the procedures for some of the scenes for the movie that was being shot on board the International Space Station. The actual final closing of the hatch will take place, as we indicated earlier, about an hour from now. And that will seal the hatch and initiate leak checks at the docking interface between the Soyuz and Nauka. But for all intents and purposes, the hatch is closed at 3:41 p.m. Central Time, 4:41 p.m. Eastern Time.
Okay, everybody says hello to you. Hello.
And with that, the camera in the Nauka vestibule has been turned off, with the crews having said farewell to one another and the 3 crew members on board the Soyuz vehicle.
How do you read me? Face to ground 2.
Once the leak checks are completed at the docking interface, the Soyuz will push off on docking from the Nauka module at 8:14 p.m. Central Time this evening. It will back away to a safe distance away from the International Space Station for the start of the deorbit burn, the engine firing, that will last 4 minutes and 39 seconds. That deorbit burn to be initiated at 10:41 p.m. Central Time this evening. That engine firing will slow the Soyuz down, allowing it to slip out of orbit, and will enable it to enter the Earth's atmosphere for the pyrotechnic separation of the 3 sections of the Soyuz at 11:10 p.m. Central Time this evening. Only that center section, the descent module, in which the crew will be strapped into their respective seats, will survive the heat of re-entry. They'll move into a plasma regime in which temperatures will build up to about 2,500 degrees. The Soyuz setting its sights on the landing site for the command to open up the parachutes that will begin their final descent towards the landing site southeast of Zhezkazgan, Kazakhstan. Landing is scheduled at 11:36 p.m. Central Time, 12:36 a.m. Eastern Time, 10:36 a.m. Kazakhstan time on Sunday morning. Right before touchdown, braking rockets on the Soyuz will fire to cushion the final impact at the landing site, and the Soyuz will be home. Once the Soyuz is down, the search and recovery forces of Rosaviatsia will have an opportunity to make their way towards the spacecraft to begin the extraction of the crew, bringing them into a nearby inflatable medical tent for checkups before they board helicopters to fly back to the staging city of Karaganda, Kazakhstan, where they will then board a Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center aircraft for a flight back to their training base in Star City, Russia. So once again, a view of the Soyuz, now housing the 3 crew members, Novitskiy, Peresild, and Shipenko, who will be returning to Earth within the next few hours, undocking less than 4.5 hours from now. That'll wrap up the first of our 3 broadcasts for this evening. Our undocking coverage begins at 8 p.m. Central Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Time later this evening, in which we'll take another look at the farewells that you just saw here on NASA television and set the stage for the departure of the 3 crew members who will be returning to Earth this evening aboard the Soyuz MS-18 spacecraft. For now, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. We'll see you back here in a few hours. This is Mission Control Houston.